Would you state and spell your name in the court?
Mark Elgart, it's E-L-G-A-R-T.
And Mr. Elgart, how are you employed?
Employed as the President and CEO of Advanced Education.
And what is advanced education?
It is a nonprofit organization focused mostly on accreditation and school improvement work.
How long has this organization been around?
It was formed in 2006.
Does it have any relation to the Advanced Ed Corporation or the Advanced Ed Group?
Well, Advanced Ed is the name we go by. It's a short name. The Advanced Education is our legal name in Georgia. But Advanced Ed operates and is known in this state through its work as the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, Council on Accreditation and School Improvement.
What is the purpose of Advanced Ed and SACS?
To help schools and school systems and other education providers improve their educational practices and conditions in support of student learning.
And how does SACS help school systems improve their educational systems?
We establish standards through the help of practitioners and experts in the field. Those standards guide the work of schools and school systems related to the practice and conditions that they are to operate under to optimize student learning.
What sort of standards do you look for and implement with school systems?
Based on research, we look at the significant areas of practice and conditions that have an impact on the quality of education. So in current standards, they're in 5 areas: purpose and direction, which is that the school or school system establishes a clear direction and purpose for its function, as well as expectations for performance. The second area is governance and leadership, establishes the policies and the infrastructure upon which the governing body will operate, and the leadership will administer the system or school. The area of most focus is the third area, which is teaching and assessing for learning, where we look at the instructional infrastructure of a school or school system, its capacity to impact student learning, its alignment with expected curricular or program areas that are either defined at the district, state, or federal level, and we look at how they use assessment results to improve student learning. The fourth area is the area of resources and support services, where we look at the use and allocation of resources to optimize the conditions and practices that are to be engaged to support student learning, and how those are directed to support students in their efforts to be successful in the school environment. And the last area is using data for continuous improvement. We expect all our schools or school systems and providers to be focused on a program of continuous improvement so that they're focused on improving their efforts no matter how good they are today, that they can achieve better performance tomorrow.
Based on the governance, or based on the factors and standards you just recommended, how does SACS evaluate school systems?
Well, first and foremost, it's
Let me interrupt you. Do we need to deal with the sequestration of witnesses? We had that yesterday, Wednesday. Do we need to do that today? Excuse me for interrupting.
Yes, Your Honor.
I think so.
Just noticed some folks walking in, and they may or may not be witness. I don't know.
Actually, Ms. Tyson is sequestered. Is Mr. Turk here again today?
He is not in the courtroom here today. Not right.
Ms. Tyson. Good, it's,
Ms. Tyson, we'll ask you to. Ms. Hightower, will you take Ms. Tyson to another courtroom, please, ma'am? And thank y'all. Sorry for the interruption.
the question again, so to make sure that I'm...
How does SACS apply those standards to school systems?
First and foremost, our process is voluntary. Schools or school systems volunteer to participate with us, and when they make that volunteer commitment, they make the commitment to meeting the standards that are established for the accreditation process. We provide the standards and the criteria under those standards to our schools and school systems. We provide training so that they understand how they are to be implemented and what the expectations or evidence that they must provide in meeting those. And typically they are applied through a regular evaluation process where a normal cycle is at least once every 5 years. A school or school system will prepare for an evaluation on those standards. In preparation for that evaluation visit, the school or school system conducts their own assessment. They provide a self-assessment, they gather evidence, they gather documentation, they work with our organization to coordinate the visit, including who will participate in the visit from the school or school system. We establish, normally it's a group of volunteers, although there could be some staff in that evaluation team we appoint. We train all those individuals to conduct the evaluation, and then on an agreed upon set of dates, we conduct the evaluation with our volunteer and staff. And after the review visit there, we gather additional documentation, review it that's been provided to us by the school system, and we draft a written report back to the school system to evaluate them against those same standards.
You said that you work with the school system in this process. Who determines who exactly you talk to, what documents you receive?
We ask the school or school system. It's a collegial process. We say, for instance, the nature of this visit, here are some key roles or people who are responsible for your key areas who you need to identify who can best inform us in those areas related to the standards. We work with them. They establish the schedule. They establish the interview groups, who will be interviewed, when they'll be interviewed. And all of that is provided to us. It is a collegial process in reaching those logistics. Secondly, they provide us all the evidence. We look to them, we say, look at your policies, could be documents from meetings, it could be data from student performance reports, it could be evidence of student work. There's a whole arena of archival evidence that they can provide to us, but they provide it to us in support of their own assessment of their school or school system.
After your team has completed that assessment, what comes next?
We write a report, and the focus of the report is, at the end of the report, is our actions. We have a list of required actions. But prior to that, we identify what we call powerful practices or opportunities of improvement. And the powerful practices are things that they're doing extremely well, that are noteworthy. Opportunities of improvement are optional to the school or school system. They're areas where they can do better. They're meeting the basic tenets of the standard or the expectation therein. The required actions, however, are the areas where we focus the attention of the school or school system. These are actions the school or school system must take to address areas that we have indicated they are less than suitable related to the criteria. And those are the actions that define the follow-up program and monitoring. We give them a prescribed period of time based on the nature of the required actions, and then they go forward and create their own improvement plans around those required actions. And we will send in, normally, depending on the nature of them, we could send in a monitoring team in a year, 6 months, or 2 years. It depends on the nature of what is occurring, but it varies from school to school or system to system.
Okay. If your report indicates required actions or needs improvements, do school systems ever disagree with those findings?
Yes, they
and
can.
Is there a procedure in place to deal with that disagreement?
If we take any adverse action against a school or school system by policy, they have the right to appeal that decision.
Okay. And who does that appeal typically come from?
The appeal typically comes from the head of whatever the unit is. It's the school, it's the principal. It's a school system, it's usually the superintendent and board chair. If it's a corporation, it's usually the CEO or the head of the division that is providing the educational services. And they have a right to appeal, and that appeal goes to an appeals committee. So it's a separate body that is separate from any of the people who are involved in the determination of the required actions.
Now, if you find required actions, how do you follow up on those to make sure that the system has complied?
There's usually a report that they must submit back to us where they provide us what they did and evidence of what they did and the impact it had on the school or school system. And depending on the severity, we may send in a monitoring team. Typically, if a school or school system is placed on probation, they will be required to have a monitoring follow-up visit after they've submitted the required documentation.
And you mentioned probation. Are there levels of accreditation?
There are statuses. We have accredited, which means you're meeting all the standards. Accredited on advisement, which means there's an area of concern that typically we give them 1 to 2 years to address. It's not a major concern, but it's a concern that must be addressed. Accredited warned is a matter that must be addressed in a year's time. It's of a little bit more significance than advisement, but the nature of it is that if it can address it in a year's time, it prevents any further problems. Accredited probation is something that must be addressed within a 6 to 12 month period. The nature of that issue is such that it could lead to a loss of accreditation because there are significant concerns around the ability of the school or school system to meet the required criteria that is defined in the standards.
And with regard to those levels that you mentioned, are they successive stages? Can one be applied without the other?
Yes, they're not designed to be sequential. You can have a school go from accredited to accredited, warrant, or probation. You can also have a school go from accredited probation all the way to accredited, but they've made substantive, significant progress to go all the way to the other level. They are not meant to be in sequence.
Now, are there other accreditation agencies that school systems have to choose from other than just SACS?
Certainly, it's voluntary.
Let's talk about DeKalb County in particular. How long has SACS been involved with DeKalb County's accreditation process?
Decades. I don't have the exact date, but they've had a long history with Southern Association Colleges and Schools.
And what has that history been like?
As best we can go back, because if you're going back decades, we can only go back to our annual reports. They've had a pretty strong history, and I think going back probably somewhere in the latter part of the 1990s, there started to be evidence of some concerns that the system was noting, not necessarily that we were noting. But over the last 10 years, it's been an up and down. An up and down performance. They've had noted issues related to governance that go back to the latest reports that we hold for 10 years. 10 years ago, there was reports that referenced governance issues and challenges between the role and responsibilities of the administration and that of the board. There was again in around 2006, 2007, reference from the board to Southern Association to define and clarify the roles and responsibilities of the administration versus the governing body. And then in 2009, 2010, the system sought us out to start to come to us under the administration of Crawford Lewis, identifying significant concerns within the system. Those began conversations that led to us providing them some direction to address those situations. Those issues eventually led to a special review team around those matters, which included resources, governance, direction of the system. And since then, we've done a full evaluation and another special review, all along the same tenor of a system that is struggling, defining its direction with support at all levels, with ownership by the system for that direction, with governance and its role with the administration, and with the use and allocation of resources to support the work of the system. And that's been a constant theme for the last 3 to 4 years.
Has SACS ever had to take action with regard to the levels of accreditation with DeKalb?
Most recently, they're currently on probation.
Okay.
And they've been on, I believe before that they were on advisement, and I would have to go back through our records to tell you any other statuses. But right now, they're on probation.
The issues that were identified by DeKalb to SACS, what sort of role does the County Board of Education play in those issues?
Well, when the issues relate to the work of the board, they play a direct role. I mean, they're directly responsible for addressing those issues.
Okay. What were some of the problems that were identified as we were to start in the beginning of the 2011 report and going forward with DeKalb?
Well, first and foremost, the ability of the system under the leadership of the board to define its purpose and direction through a strategic plan that is developed as a direction that is not only just built by a couple staff members. There's a legitimate formal process that engages the board, the administration, the schools, and the community to craft that strategic direction. They still have that need. Even today, they have not been able to go through such a process and define their purpose and direction, which is commonly found in virtually every school and school system in this country. The second area of significant concern was the governing body, its ability to adopt policy that guides its role and responsibilities and follow those policies. The second part of the governance is its ability to be clear in its distinction and its role from that of the administration. There is, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of conflict between whatever administration's been in place and whatever governing body's been in place, and it's basically around who's responsible for what and the roles that each group plays in the operation of the school system. The third area which emerges is the use and allocation of resources to support student learning. They've had some financial difficulties which haven't been unusual on one sense, that virtually all school systems in this country had since the onset of the recession. However, theirs have reached levels that other school systems have, where they have found themselves in deficit spending and found themselves with budgets that the ones that they enact and how they administer those budgets are not aligned. In other words, they're taking actions that are out of alignment with the budget that they've adopted.
As a result of the January 2011 audit by SACS, what action was taken for DeKalb's accreditation status?
Advisement. I
And-
believe, I'd have to look at a record, but I'm recalling it right now, I believe it was on advisement.
Okay. And what sort of steps did SACS expect the board and the county to take as a result of being placed on accredited advisement?
To look at the required actions and create improvement plans or response plans to address each of the required actions. And some of those required actions from 2011 have been addressed, and I think the reports note those have been completed. Some have not been addressed. Today, between the 2011 and 2012 interactions with the system, there are 11 required actions that have not been completed by the system. And some of those stem back from 2011. And our normal procedures is all required actions are completed within 2 years. So they're right now outside that window.
You said that the district completed some actions and did not complete some actions. With reference to the March 2012 report, what's the reason for that particular report with DeKalb?
March 2012 was a regularly scheduled evaluation,
Okay.
which looked at all of the standards. It was not a special review.
And within the report, there are accommodations or required action. Would you explain a little bit about the functions of both of those?
Well, at March 2012, we noted areas that we felt the system was moving in a positive direction. And as was noted in those areas where they felt the district was moving in a positive direction, there was also a description that the system must sustain that positive direction, that was critical, that there were areas that they were showing promise. They had hired a new superintendent. It appeared that the new superintendent and board were in the beginnings of establishing a new direction for the system, and it was very important that those efforts be brought to completion. As opposed to when we went later in that year, there became a significant demarcation between our observations in March and our observations later in 2012. The very elements of areas where we saw promise, we didn't see them sustained 6 months later.
Would it be fair to say that DeKalb had kind of backslid from the March to the October report?
Things had started to unravel where they had made some progress, where we no longer saw evidence of progress.
Okay. And you didn't see the evidence of progress anymore. What issues were you still seeing in October of 2012?
A lack of a formal strategic plan, conflict between the governing body, within the governing body, and conflict between the governing body and the administration, and struggling with maintaining a budget and exercising that budget within their means.
And as part of these reports, did you observe the Board of Education and also in particular Dr. Walker?
I was conducting periodically mediation sessions with them, had attended maybe at most 2 board meetings, but I had been meeting with the board on a fairly regular basis for a period of about a year, and then it slowed down.
And how did these mediation sessions come about? Is that part of the normal SACS routine?
No, the former chair of the Board of Education for DeKalb, Tom Bowen, requested those meetings, met with me, and asked me if I would conduct those on behalf of the board. And I began conducting them at Tom's request. And we met pretty much every month for a period of about 9 or 10 months. And then the meetings slowed down and eventually ended.
Do you know why they slowed down and ended?
I don't know for sure. I know there was a change in leadership.
Objection, Your Honor, to the speculation. He said he doesn't know for sure.
What do you know?
I know that once there was a change in leadership of the board, that the board chair was directing these meetings. Then after that, there was only 2 more meetings. But I have no idea why they chose to. This was an option to them. It was not a requirement of them.
What was the change in leadership you're referring to?
They changed board chair.
I'm sorry?
They changed their board chair. They elected a new board chair.
From?
Tom Bowen to Eugene Walker.
Okay. As part of the mediation sessions that you headed up, what observations did you make about the board's behavior?
When the board first entered into mediation, it was apparent from the very beginning that the board was divided into at least 3 separate camps. They were in their own groups. There was no controlling majority that had a common interest. Each group had their own interest. And in those sessions, their differences on issues related to budgeting, related to their role, related to the direction system, were clearly communicated in different ways. Tom's effort was try to unify the 3 camps, and he felt that the mediation sessions could help find a common pathway, that the 3 separate entities could come together. During that period of time, they were in a superintendent search, which took an inordinate amount of time. The average time is less than 6 months. It took them 18 months. And part of that was because the 3 camps could not agree. They could not. They continued both privately and publicly debating the merits of the candidates, but they couldn't find a common pathway in electing a superintendent. During those mediation sessions, one of the common statements that was made by fellow board members, and others would agree, was their big problem by their own admission was, we do the routine stuff okay, but the big stuff we really struggle with. Well, the big stuff for a board is hiring a superintendent, establishing policy, setting a budget. These are the things that are germane to the board's work, and they, by their own admission, that's where they struggled. They just could not find common pathways. We were working through those. I saw some progress, and I saw some of the breakdown in the 3 camps, but then when there was a change in chair, things reverted back to the 3 camps, where there's no controlling majority. There's a lot of lobbying each other's camps to get enough of a majority vote to move forward. That is where right now, at that time, where their governance broke down in major areas. The hiring of the superintendent that they did, it was a difficult process for them, and in the end, they really didn't have a unified board supportive of that superintendent from the very beginning. There was a lot of compromising done by board members, but that process from the very beginning, by their own admission, they were uncertain. Did they make the right choice? Can we support this superintendent? There were 3 board members who wrote a pretty significant statement, a written letter against the choice of the superintendent, publicized that. There was a lot of debate over whether that was ethical or professional, and there was a lot of breakdown in their ability to communicate with one another. So they had a new superintendent, but not a unified support for that new superintendent.
You identified that some of the coming back into camps occurred about the time of the change in leadership. Did Saxon yourself believe that there was causation there?
I think they were in a process of improvement that didn't get completed. And they needed to stay a path where they had a board chair, which at the point in time, Tom Bowen, although he's in one of the camps, most of the people felt comfortable, but Tom was no longer willing to continue in that area. And then it was challenging for them to identify who would chair because of the three camps. You know, one camp would try to negotiate with the other the support for a candidate. And those are the big things that a board, such an effective board, needs to do extremely well, but an ineffective board will struggle with, and it has a breakdown. And by their own admission, those big things they struggle with.
DeKalb, is DeKalb the first school system to run into issues with governance?
No.
Why are the issues that DeKalb suffered from important in relation to accreditation?
The governing body sets the direction for a school system. And if there's a breakdown in that governing body, it has an impact through the entire system. It affects its operations, it affects how it uses its resources, it affects what the adults and kids know are the expectations. I conducted many sessions with boards that have struggled in this area, and it's not uncommon for it to happen. What generally happens is through training they're able to redirect their efforts and unify, but when they're unable, it has a dramatic effect on the overall health of the system.
Would that include student performance?
Yes, absolutely. We have through our research, you will not find a dysfunctional board of education and a high-performing school system. We just haven't found it. And there's been a number of research studies out there, the impact of board governance on student achievement, because board governance sets the tone, the direction, the expectation for a school system to operate. And you can look at a number of studies that will show the correlation between the two.
Now, SACS released these various reports, but were there other ways that the board members were aware of these problems?
Oh, absolutely. First and foremost, the board members themselves identified these problems. This didn't come from us to them as a surprise. They came to us initially saying, we have a major problem. They came to my office initially with the superintendent search saying, we're struggling. There's been a breakdown in trust among us. There's been a breakdown in communication. We need help to get past this. One of the reasons it took 18 months. They still to this day, they're uncertain who, but they had release of information that was germane or only to their executive sessions. And things that should have remained private and confidential were released. Somebody in that room released that information that was only shared in that room. So that breakdown of trust and communication was their first acknowledgement that we have a problem here and we need help to fix it.
After SACS started working with the board to correct some of those issues, did the board members agree to cooperate with the required actions, I mean?
The board members absolutely did. When the latest report, the one that placed them on probation, we met with most of the board. Was there at our offices along with some key staff from the system and staff of my organization. And in that meeting, the board clearly stated, and members of the board clearly stated, we accept these required actions. These are areas we must improve in, and we are committed to doing so.
Did you see any disconnect between that acknowledgement and the way the board and Dr. Walker acted after that?
We didn't see any evidence from the board or school system of addressing the required actions until just recently.
And just recently, is there any reason that those required actions began?
Well, the current interim superintendent and a new board established the expectation that plans would be drawn up to address each of the required actions, and they've drawn up those plans and started to implement actions associated with those plans, and we sent in our monitoring team. And that monitoring visit is not complete yet, However, that monitoring visit did indicate orally to me that they are seeing some progress in addressing those required actions.
Okay. And when you say new board, are you referring to the board that was appointed by the governor?
Plus the remaining board members that were elected in November.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the difference specifically between the old board and the new board. What progress have you seen with that new board in coming to terms with the required actions?
Well, first, directing the staff to begin to mobilize their efforts to address them and setting that expectation very clearly. Secondly, I've met with the new board in open session. The nature of their questions, the focus of their efforts on not only those required actions, but starting to address the overall challenges the system is facing and providing direction to the superintendent and his staff to address those. And there is evidence from the monitoring visit that those efforts are underway and starting to produce some positive results.
Did you see those same efforts evidenced in the old board?
In fairness, we did between around the March 2012, and they had come out of, they had done the mediation session, full evaluation, they had hired a new superintendent, and we began to see some progress. And as I noted earlier, 6 months later, that had unraveled. So even though we see progress today, our statement to the system is we still need to see it sustained over time. We're not willing to say today the new board has made and achieved actions that are going to be sustained. They know from us, when we come back in December, sustained effort along those lines of progress must be evident.
It's been said that the new board might have just been able to put the capstone on the old board's actions. In your professional opinion and based on your observations, do you agree with that assessment?
No, because the old board struggled, and I agree with their own assessment of themselves. Right up until the day they were moved, they struggled with the big decision making. And that is just something that it may have been the combination of them, but they struggle mightily making the big decisions.
Based on what you have observed and what SACS has reserved, would Dr. Walker's presence on the board more likely than not increase the ability of the school district to get off of accredited probation?
No.
And why do you believe that?
Right now, a stable environment further on addressing the current conditions for the system is critical to them being able to address it by December. Any further upheaval or change at this point in time could be extremely problematic for the system.
Based on SACS evaluations, did you see that stability in Dr. Walker before he was removed on the board?
No, our reports show that the system was very uneven in its performance over the last couple of years. There was progress would be made, and then there'd be one step forward and 2 steps backwards. And so it was a period that was very unstable for them.
Thank you, Dr. Elgart. No further questions at this time.
All right, before we conduct cross-examination, I think it would be appropriate in that the newly produced documents are from Advanced Ed and the witnesses the CEO of Advanced Ed. Take a break now, allow petitioner's counsel an opportunity to review these documents. So when I alluded to a time to look at it earlier, this is part of that time, if not all of that time. Okay,
that's fine.
We will recess until 11 o'clock, and then I'll expect you to have, that's 22 minutes from now.
Okay.
And I will expect you to have reviewed at council, and if any issues were from these or germane to cross-examination, to be ready to proceed. Does the Respondents' Council have a copy of the documents yourself?
We do, Your Honor, so I provided us a copy.
I think, to be fair to Dr. Elgart, we might want to let him take a peek at these documents too, just in case. But I'll be back at 11 o'clock by that clock.
We have about 20 minutes. morning, Dr. Elgart. I'm
Good morning.
Danielle O'Beara, and I am the attorney for Mr. Eugene Walker, and thank you for being here so I can ask you some questions. First of all, let's review the report that Advanced Ed prepared in January of 2011. And I'm going to hand you an exhibit binder
Okay.
so that you can have an opportunity to look at the documents with me.
Okay.
And if you would turn to Exhibit 26. If you turn to page 11 through 13 of 26, in this report there are 8 required actions that you all instructed the school district to address, correct?
Correct.
And of these 8 required actions, how many of them dealt with governance issues?
Six?
All 6 of these dealt with governance issues?
No, there's 8.
Oh, are you saying number 6?
No. Let me count again. Five, I'm sorry. I counted 5 out of the 8.
5 out of the 8 dealt with governance issues according to you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And which 5 out of the 8 dealt with governance issues?
Number 1, number 3, number 4, number 6, and number 7.
Do you know if the school board and the district, if they were able to address the issues in this report to your satisfaction?
I would have to see the follow-up reports. I mean, from what I remember, what's remaining, number 1 still remains. And not sure if any of the others, I would have to see the current list. But
And-
number 1 is by my memory.
So according to your testimony, number 1 was an outstanding issue. Now, according to this report, in October of 2011, a monitoring team was to go back to the DeKalb County School District in order to follow up, correct?
By October 31st, yes.
And do you recall that that did in fact happen?
Yes.
And do you recall the outcome of that October 2011 follow-up?
No, because I don't have, if I can be pointed to the report. I mean, you're,
If you were turn to exhibit number 25, page 25 of that exhibit.
okay, thank you. This is the full evaluation in March of 2012.
That's correct. But if I want to direct your attention to halfway down the page, it says that there was a follow-up visit in October of 2011, and they determined that the system had completed 6 of the 8 action items.
Okay,
So 6 of these items have been completed according to Advanced Ed, correct?
where are you pointing this to?
If you would go down to the paragraph beginning with during 2011,
What page?
What page?
page 25 of the report.
Yes,
And it says specifically a follow-up special review visit in October 18th through 19th of 2011 determined the system had completed 6 of the 8 action items.
correct.
So when the March of 2012 report was completed, it was yet another follow-up to the things that had occurred in January and October of 2011, correct?
In part. The March was a full evaluation. It was not just focused on those required actions.
So as a full evaluation, we could expect that March report to be a far more comprehensive and complete evaluation, correct?
It would cover all the standards that applied, yes.
And in fact, during the March evaluation, there were a lot more individuals from Advanced Ed who were sit in to the DeKalb County School District, correct?
Because the scope of the visit was much larger, yes.
And if you would turn to page 30 of Exhibit 25, there's a very long list of the number of people who participated in the quality assurance review of
Correct.
DeKalb County. And there were far fewer people who went there for the special review team reviews in January of 2011 and October of 2011, correct?
Because the nature of those visits was focused on a single or a small number of items, not the full breadth of the standards.
Okay. So if we look at the March 2011 report, it starts out with several commendations for the system,
Excuse
correct?
me, do you mean March 2012?
I'm sorry, March 2012, yes. And at Exhibit 25, there are several commendations that the review committee, quality assurance review committee found, correct?
Correct.
And one of the things that they commended the system for, the Board of Education for, was that they had found a superintendent who quickly put forth a process that you all agreed with, right?
In the 90-day plan, yes.
And the second commendation was that the Board of Education had empowered the superintendent to implement a new organizational structure that is fair, efficient, and drives resources to the classroom, right?
Correct.
So these are all things you're saying about this Board of Education that was in existence in March of 2012, correct?
Correct.
And so it goes on to say, in commendation number 3, that the district has employed exceptionally passionate and caring school level leadership, right?
Correct.
And it says in commendation number 4, the district and schools use a variety of communication tools to keep stakeholders informed, correct?
Correct.
And in commendation number 5, it says the district is institutionalizing and monitoring a variety of assessments at multiple levels that ensure quality assurance and fidelity to the mission of the district, correct?
Correct.
So it's correct that this district, the school and the school board, that they were making progress, right?
I think what it notes here is at that point in time, there were things that they were doing well, but as several of them, which you noted, it was at the beginning stages, that they
So
employed a
in
superintendent, they empowered a superintendent, but not carried out in either case the work associated with those commendations.
But isn't it correct that the school board that was in existence in March of 2012 accomplished things that were important for the school district, right?
At that point in time, yes.
So your testimony that these folks did nothing is not correct.
I didn't say they did, I haven't said they did nothing.
And you wouldn't agree with that. They did accomplish things, right?
As I indicated earlier, at that point in time, they were showing progress. They did not sustain that progress, and over the next 6 months, it went in the opposite direction.
Okay, well, we'll get to what happened over the next few months. But as of March 2012, you gave them a positive bill of health, right?
On the commendations, we had required actions noted, though.
And if we look at the required actions, only one of those required actions involved governance and leadership, correct?
I'd have to look at them all.
Let me ask a question. I'm sorry. At this point, October 2011, were they on probation?
They were not placed on probation until December of 2012.
All right. All right. Thank you.
And Yana, just to clarify, at this point it's March of 2012,
Okay.
not 2011.
All right. Thank you.
Three of the 6 had to do with related to responsibilities of the governing body.
And you said 3 had to do with governance?
Responsibilities, yes.
And which 3 were those?
Required action 1, establish and enforce a policy of board members honor the chain of command when communicating with stakeholders. Establish a formal change management process for new system initiative, vision, mission, strategic plan, which I mentioned earlier. Conducting an internal audit across all schools in order to identify areas of need and to allocate appropriately throughout the district.
Now, when this report, and let me just ask you a little bit about how these reports are prepared. The people that you send in, they have training in advanced ed's method of conducting these interviews and preparing the reports, correct?
Correct.
And what is your role in preparing the reports?
Once the report goes through several levels of review by staff, and also we, through our volunteer base, have reader reviewers. The final report and a letter that will go with it is reviewed by me, just to make sure that it's consistent with our policies.
In the special review report of October of 2012, there's not a list of the people involved in the review. Why is that?
Well, the fact that it was included in the March 12 is not usual. The list of people who participate is in other documents. It's usually not in the report. It's in other documents and communications between the school and school system and our organization. So it doesn't get repeated normally in a report.
So this is an unusual occurrence.
It's not, it just was something that was added, but there's no value to it because the system already knew through other documents who was serving on the teams, and they do know in all cases.
Now, I want to talk about some of the specific things that the March 2012 report said. And if you would turn to page 14 of Exhibit 25, and if you go down to the 4th full paragraph, according to the report prepared by Advanced Ed in March of 2012, it was commented that this is the most solid board formulation in 7 years. And that
Wait,
was...
what? Not on the document.
I'm sorry, if you would go down to the 4th full paragraph, it begins with the line management system. That's the first sentence of the report. If you go down to the next to last sentence in the report.
Okay. I see it.
Okay, and that's page 14. It says it was commented that this is the most solid board formulated in 7 years.
That was.
I haven't asked the question yet. So these were the types of comments that your reviewers were receiving about the Board of Education that Mr. Walker served on back in March of 2012, correct?
This was a single comment that was shared with them.
Excuse me.
It was commented
Excuse me, let me ask a question. Did you participate in interviewing any of the people who provided comments that made
No, I'm
it
just
into
reading the
I
sentence.
haven't finished my question. That made it into this report?
I'm just reading the sentence.
Okay.
The
But my
sentence-
question is, did you participate in interviewing any of the people who made comments that made it into this report?
No, I just.
Okay, so
Wait a
everything...
minute, let him finish his answer.
No,
Okay.
I am simply reading the sentence that you referenced, and it said it. Doesn't say plural. It was commented.
Okay.
That's all.
So you don't know how many people expressed that opinion, correct?
Neither do you.
My question is simply, do you know, because I'm not testifying, how many people...
I've already
made
answered that. I
particular-
did not interview.
Sir, I'm just going to ask you to allow me to finish, and I promise I'll allow you to finish. You don't know how many people expressed that sentiment when this report was being prepared, correct?
I've answered the question, and all I did was read the
Just
sentence.
answer it again. Yes or no?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered. She's just acknowledged it.
No, all I've done is read the statement. I did not interview anybody, and I read the statement. That's it.
And so you have to rely upon the how this report was prepared by the people who work for Advanced Ed, correct?
Of course.
And do you believe that they accurately prepared the report?
To the best of my knowledge.
And you have no basis to believe that they placed within this report statements or information that they didn't actually receive?
Correct.
So if we go to the very next paragraph of the report, it says there is more honesty in recent months, and this is calming one's adversarial relationships among board members. And do you believe that they actually received that comment or made that observation?
I have no reason not to.
Some stakeholders report the board has began to move forward in a great direction. Do you believe that comment was made to the members of the team who went in March of 2012?
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point.
Yes.
He's already answered similar questions to that, but she's essentially asking him to speculate on the various things. I don't think it's an appropriate question for him.
Counsel, I believe this is in evidence.
It is in evidence, Your
And I'm
Honor,
gonna
but
review it.
Mr. Elgart, Dr. Elgart has testified extensively on direct about, in general, what these reports were showing. We believe it's important to talk about specifics in this report. He's testified that my client was not doing his job, essentially. However, his team found just a few months before October, and we'll get to that report, that he was in fact doing his job. And it's very important that we have the opportunity to demonstrate that by going over some of these comments in this report.
I would prefer you to the subject matter is relevant, but asking him, you think they were telling the truth in your report? I mean, that's getting a little argumentative. Why don't you ask him a question along the lines of, did you consider that in your testimony here today, or does that change your testimony, or something like that? We don't have to be so argumentative here.
Your Honor, it's not my intent to be argumentative. Thanks for the correction.
Nobody walks in the door intending to be argumentative. Somehow it happens.
Somehow it happens.
Just think through I know you're getting that rhythm of cross-examination and direct examination, but let's just focus our attention on whether or not these things that are in the report, which I'm going to read, but that you perceive to be positives. It'd be fair to ask him, was he aware of that before he testified on direct examination? Or it'd be fair to ask him, does that change his testimony? But to say, do you believe that? I think we can accomplish something with a little rephrasing of the question and perhaps adjusting the tone just a little bit.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Okay. Mr. Elgart, I'm going to direct your attention to page 20 of Exhibit 25. And if you would go after description, the third paragraph and the first sentence of the third paragraph. That paragraph states that the district utilizes long-range and annual budgetary resources that are coordinated through proper procedures to support an educational system that strives to meet the needs of all its students. When you all went back in October of 2012, did you go back and try to determine, compare what this report had said about the long-range and budgetary acumen of the board in considering what was happening in October of 2012?
Of course, we went and looked at all recent reports of the system.
Now, when you say you looked at all recent reports of the system, did you look at the audit reports the state audit reports that have been prepared in the recent years for the system?
Yes.
And when you looked at those state audit reports, you didn't find the state auditors raising any red flags that the money within the system may have been misspent, correct?
No, the reports didn't note that.
And in fact, if you looked at the state audit reports, you also saw that the system, year after year, had a fund balance, didn't you, at the end of the year?
Had one.
And that would have been beginning in 2008 when Dr. Walker went onto the board, the system had a fund balance at the end of that fiscal year, correct?
Unless you show me the documents, I can't verify that.
Well, do you have any reason to think that's not true?
Objection, Your Honor. She's asking him to speculate about a hearsay document.
He can answer the question.
He just testified a little while ago.
He can answer the question if he can answer it, and then if
I can't answer it because it's not a work product, it's the state's work product, and I don't have it in front of me.
Well,
So there's
I'm
no way I
asking-
can answer it.
Okay, thank you. I'm asking, did you, as part of your review of the DeKalb County School Board, your numerous reviews, did you all go back and look at the state audits pertaining to the district?
The most recent ones we did.
Okay. And the most recent audit showed that the system had a fund balance at the end of the year, correct?
The most recent as of what?
Well, we're
As
talking
of
about the
which-
2012 fiscal year.
So we would have seen
Your
the
Honor.
audit at the end of the
Your Honor.
11-12 school year. That's it. Would have been the last one.
what?
Notwithstanding that he has attempted to answer the question, she is asking him to comment on hearsay for the truth of the matter asserted. Whether they relied on something in looking at, and whether they looked at something in doing a report is one thing, but she's asking him to comment on the truth of the of those different.
No, I'm not
Hold
asking.
on, hold on. Asking whether or not they had a budget deficit. I don't see where that gets into hearsay, Tara.
She's asking him about the conclusions of another report, and she's asking him to comment on it for the truth of the matter. Even a statistical report can still be considered hearsay.
Well, do you have the report you want him to look at?
I do not have the report, but I believe he's answered the question that he believes there was a fund balance.
Well, in addition, Your Honor, there'd also be a best evidence. She's asking him to comment on something that the best practice would be to have the actual report itself, along with someone who can identify, authenticate, and explain that document.
Well, I find myself not understanding why the question was asked or why the objection was made. And that may be my shortcoming. I mean, you were on a roll there with the report, and all that was relevant, and then you interjected another report somewhere.
Okay, I can move on, Your Honor.
All right, let's do that.
Okay. Not a problem.
I don't mean to make light of the subject, but there was symmetry, and then there was a diversion there.
Okay, not a problem. I also wanted to ask you about the claim in the March 12th of 2012 report that the district had followed guidelines for establishing budgets and financial audits as required by law. Did that change between March 12th and October 2012? March of 2012 and October of 2012?
I don't know. Do you have something that said in October 2012 that we said that they didn't follow the law?
Well, you have a report that you prepared, and you have testimony that I've heard today where you said that they were operating with deficits. So
But
tell
ma'am,
me,
you're asking
well, let me
whether,
finish my question. So just tell me, when you say that this school system, under the leadership and the participation of this board member, Eugene Walker, that they were operating within a deficit, what are you talking about specifically?
okay. You started off by saying in October 2012, we never said that they did anything illegal. The report never indicated anything illegal. The report talked about the performance of the system, and in particular the performance of the governing body, and how effective they were in carrying out that. You can do your work legally and be ineffective. And our observation in December was they were struggling being effective in using the resources of the system. And board members themselves reported to us that they were struggling with that.
Okay, now I want you to tell me some specifics, because you've made a grand statement, and I want to know specifically, how were they struggling to use the resources of the system?
Okay. Board members, and this was outside the
And I
contents.
would like to just place one objection. I'm only talking about Mr. Gene Walker. So if you could limit your testimony or your responses to what Mr. Walker was doing that you thought was inappropriate.
We measured the performance of the Board of Education, not the performance of individuals.
Okay.
And the reports reflect the measurement of the Board of Education in their performance and their effectiveness.
Okay, so how was the board that Mr. Walker served on ineffective in using the resources of the system in October 2012?
For example, over the last 3 years that the board reported to us, they budgeted $1 million a year for legal fees and spent in excess of at least 3 times that on average each year. They
Now, let me
budgeted.
ask you a question.
Let me finish.
They budgeted, I believe it was approximately, the number I can't remember because I'd have to look at it, but it was around $10,000 a year for, it has to be more than that, utilities. I'm not remembering the number, but they exceeded each year, even though the trend indicated that they would be spending much more on utilities. They budgeted a lower number each year. They did the same thing with legal fees, and these budgets were done in part by the board through their budget committee in areas that were directly to the board's responsibility. But board members provided us documentation where the budget was significantly exceeded repeatedly and that the board didn't adjust their budgets to the trend data.
Now, you provided me with 2 examples. One is legal fees exceeded the cost, and the other one was utilities exceeded the cost. Are there any others?
I don't have all the notes in front of me, and if you're referencing a document, I can. But those are by memory. I can provide you
Okay.
that.
Now, when you said the board members produced the budget, that's not correct, is it?
I said the board members have a budget committee.
And
That out of that budget committee is a budget that is presented to the overall board for adoption.
And what is your understanding of what the budget committee did?
The budget committee was responsible for ensuring that the budget was developed and made a recommendation to the overall board for adoption.
Are you aware that there's been testimony during the course of these proceedings that the budget was developed by staff?
I was sequestered. I have no idea what anybody else testified.
Does that sound like the appropriate process for the school district to follow, that the budget would be prepared by the staff at the direction of the superintendent?
That's normally what is found.
And that's the process that should be followed, correct?
That's normally what is found.
And do you have any personal knowledge that the DeKalb County School Board deviated from that process?
The school system was operating under a number of committees that the governing body would lead. One of those committees was a budget committee.
And so my question again is, do you have any personal knowledge that the DeKalb County school system or the school board members deviated from that policy of allowing the staff to develop the budget?
The policy of the school system was that the budget committee was responsible for developing the budget in concert with staff. That, if you want to identify that policy, the policy of this school system was that a budget committee led by board members was responsible for ensuring the development of the budget. That is the policy of that school system.
And can you identify the policy that you believe would support your statement?
I can't. I had their policy book. You'd have to show it to me. I'd have to look it up.
And if the testimony is that that's not the case, you wouldn't have any
Objection, Your Honor. She's misstating the testimony that we heard yesterday, which was that the board and the staff worked very closely together.
Yeah, let's don't characterize other testimony. Just ask a question on the subject matter.
Now, another statement that's contained within the report from March of 2012 is that the Board of Education and the district was making continuous improvement based on the visits and interviews and the review of artifacts that was done. And was that your experience up until that point, that they were making continuous improvement within the school district?
Are you referencing a specific statement in this report?
There is a specific statement in the report, which I just paraphrased, and I'm asking, based on your experience up until March of 2012, was the school system making continuous improvement?
The system started to make improvement after a very difficult period where they had gone from administration that was under Crawford Lewis to a temporary under Ramona Tyson, through a very difficult 18-month search for a superintendent. And during those couple years, it was very difficult and challenging for the system. So between the point in which the Superintendent Atkinson was hired and the March 2012 report, there was signs of progress that the system was beginning to make. Those signs of progress dissipated after March of 2012.
And you said they started to disappear after March of 2012. What specific incidents occurred that lead you to the conclusion that they started to disappear?
Well, we sent in a team in December of 2012. There was, between that period of time, there was a number of ongoing concerns communicated to us by members of the board itself, staff, and members of the community, which by our policies required us to provide the system with the opportunity to respond to those concerns. They did, and we scheduled a special review to determine whether or not there was any validity to those concerns, and that visit was conducted in the fall of 2012.
And thank you for that explanation. And I just want to talk about specifics, because what you said sounded very vague to me. Did anyone from the school system ever communicate directly to you specific problems that were occurring within the DeKalb County School District after March of 2012?
To me, directly, yes.
To you, yes. So who communicated directly to you problems that were occurring?
Okay.
Objection, Your Honor. There was some talk earlier with regard to the subpoenas about the process by which SACS evaluates, and part of that is in regards to ensuring anonymity and the effective presentation of these reports. My concern here is that Dr. Elgart is being asked to comment on those very same things that his counsel earlier was arguing that these documents should not be produced for.
The purpose of your question is, are you trying to identify people?
I'm not trying to identify anyone. I'm trying to identify specific problems that they claim existed. So I want to know, and I think it's very relevant though, who told them these problems existed.
I think the question is relevant. I think the objection is an appropriate issue recognition. I'm going to ask the witness to avoid names, but perhaps describe staff member, teacher, principal,
Well, Your
community
Honor,
person.
I just want to note my objection on the record to that, because who made the claim may be just as important as what they're saying in evaluating the veracity or the bias or the prejudice involved. And as far as I know, SACS has no privilege to have their documents or their sources remain anonymous. I mean, SACS is not a privileged organization. They're not covered by the code in any way that I'm aware of. So I don't know what the basis would be for making a special exception for them.
You're going back to one thing that we mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, was this is not an opportunity for Dr. Walker to litigate the veracity of the report itself. We're not here to figure that out. What we're here to do is figure out whether Dr. Walker would be more likely to get the...
I've made my ruling. I'm going to ask the witness to stay away from names, but be as descriptive as you can in who you talk with.
Thank you.
Several members of the board members, came to me directly, indicated their concern with the condition of the budget, that they had depleted their reserves, and that they were overspending in areas that the budget could not accommodate. Additionally, those board members indicated to me that they felt that the board was going back into its smaller camps where it was having a great deal of difficulty reaching consensus. Third, those board members indicated that they began to see a breakdown in relationship between the superintendent and the board itself, and it was starting to have a impact on the ability of the system to function effectively. Fourth, we had people who would routinely go to board meetings. That they go and they observe board meetings. They sit there, they want to know the business of the school district. Had either called or sent communications to us indicating their concern that they had, even though things had seemed as though everything was moving in a positive direction in March, they were witnessing a much significant return to where there were struggles prior to that. So all of those were shared, but no determinations were ever made on those other than to ask the system to respond to those, to say, is there any possible evidence that these statements that have been shared with us are accurate?
Did you ever receive any communications from the superintendent saying that she was having a problem dealing with the board members?
I directed questions to the superintendent and asked the superintendent in an official capacity to respond to those statements to us. Is there challenges that have started to emerge? The superintendent confirmed those in meetings with me that there were challenges.
And when you say an official request or...
There was a letter sent to the superintendent.
And are you referring to the letter that preceded the October 2012 special review?
Mm-hmm.
And when you say she responded to you, are you referring to her response that was dated in September of 2012?
That was her official response on the letter that I sent her.
Okay, so, and I want you to turn to Exhibit 40, which is part of the binder. And there may not be a tab for 40, but it's in there at the back.
Yes.
Is this the official response that you're referring to?
Yes.
And this is the response in which you claim the superintendent said, confirmed to you that there were problems.
No, I did not say that.
Okay, so
I
this
said
is
in a direct conversation with her.
Oh, so you're saying in a direct conversation with her, she told you there were problems?
Yes.
Okay. And it's not reflected, the conversation of the contents of that conversation is not reflected in any documents, correct?
No.
Because in this letter that from September 2012, she conveys to you that the system the district is moving forward and they're making progress, and she doesn't indicate that there are any problems. Is that correct?
She discussed in her letter matters that were not asked in my letter to her. She did not directly respond to some of the areas noted in my letter to her. She only covered areas that were germane to things that she was working on in her efforts to improve the system.
So, going back to, and do you recall when you had this conversation with the superintendent?
Yes.
And
I
when
don't
was
know
that?
the exact date. It was just prior to the letter I sent to her because I wanted to give her professional courtesy that we will be sending her a letter indicating that she would have 30 days to respond regarding concerns related to matters in that letter.
Do you recall if one of her specific issues that she had concerning the board dealt with the fact that she was being asked to provide information regarding contracts that had been approved without contracts that had been given to individuals without board approval of $100,000 or less?
I don't recall that.
Do you recall any specific issues that she communicated to you?
She was general and careful in her comments, but really she felt there was a breakdown in trust and communication that was beginning to emerge. And I did not ask her for anything more than specific because we had a role to play, which was to make an independent decision. And I did not want more specifics other than the fact that she recognized that there were some struggles. that had begun to emerge.
Now, after this conversation with her, did you continue to have conversations with her about what was going on in the district?
No, not specifically. All I did was related to this process and how this process, the policies under which this process occurs and the procedure that must be followed.
Now, you said earlier that there were also board members who came to you regarding the condition of the budget. Did you do anything to independently verify their claims?
I did not do that. That's the function of the team that was sent in there in October.
So any verification would have occurred through the special review that occurred in October 2012, is
Correct.
that correct?
Correct.
Now, do you consider passing a budget to be a major undertaking or requirement of the Board of Education?
It's a major responsibility, yes.
And are you aware that between 2008 until the time of Dr. Eugene Walker's removal from the board, he was on a board that was able to pass a budget?
By law, they're required to have a budget.
Okay, my question is, are you
Yes,
aware
I'm
that he was able to do
well,
it?
I don't have records going back to 2008 regarding that matter you're asking me. All I can answer is by law they're supposed to. I can't confirm that they did. I don't have any
You don't have any
documents.
reason to know, to believe they did not?
Counselor, I'll trust your statement.
Thank you.
I have no reason to doubt it because by law they must do so.
And you agree with me that that's one of the big decisions that the Board of Education has to make for any school district, correct?
It's one of their responsibilities, but more important to that responsibility is ensuring that budget is carried out with within its means, and the board has a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the resources are used wisely to meet the expectations for the system.
So to restate my question, because you didn't respond directly to it, you would agree with me that passing a budget is one of the big decisions that the Board of Education has to make every single
It's
year.
part of a big decision. It is not the big decision. The big decision is how you carry out that budget. The budget is simply a plan. It is actually, it's more routine than it may sound. It's carrying out that budget and monitoring how it is implemented. That's the most important responsibility.
Now, and you've only provided me with two areas where you say the Dr. Walker and his fellow school board members did not adhere to the budget, and that was legal fees and utilities. But despite that, they were able to have a fund balance every single year except for one, correct?
I don't have the records in front of me, Counselor.
But that's something that SACS would be looking at and would find important, correct?
And it would be something I would look at and would find very disconcerting that they'd have 1 year where they didn't have a fund balance, and why that happened.
Now, I want to take a look at the October 2012 report, and it's at Exhibit 24 in the binder that's before you.
Okay.
And as we're turning to that report, could you tell me, does SACS have any oversight from anyone?
What does that have to do with this report? No.
You just
What
have
are
to
asking?
answer my question. Does SACS have any oversight from
Define
anyone?
what you mean by oversight.
Is there anyone that accredits SACS?
Well, we're an accrediting agency that's referenced well over 500 times in state laws. We're also identified for different purposes by the U.S. Department of Education on things, for instance, admission into any Department of Defense. If you want to go into the military, you want to go in the Marines, you have to have graduated from an
His
accredited
question
school.
is not responsive.
I think it is.
Okay.
So the U.S. Department of
hold on. He's outlining the various agencies and realms where they have to satisfy. So I think he's being responsive.
Okay.
Okay. So we're referenced in over 500 times in state law across this country for various reasons with germane to that state, and every state is a little bit different. We're also referenced by the U.S. Department of Ed for certain things that require accreditation. But that's it. We only operate up through, SACS does, through pre-K through 12. The process is voluntary. And so and we've been around, SACS was formed in 1895. And it's a voluntary organization, nonprofit, established here in the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Now, in all of those references and citations that you all have from federal agencies, is there anyone in any of those agencies that is monitoring the activities of SACS?
You'd have to ask those agencies, but states typically...
Well, I'm asking you in the capacity of the CEO of this company. Do you know of anyone that monitors your activity?
We're not a government agency. We're a
It just
nonprofit,
requires
voluntary
a yes or a
organization.
no. Does anyone monitor you or not?
My board of trustees.
I'm hearing some comments in the audience that are going to have to stop. They're either going to stop or we're going to ask the state trooper to escort you out. All right. Ask the question again and please answer
Okay,
it.
so is there anyone or any agency or anybody that monitors the activities of SACS?
We are a nonprofit, a private entity. Okay, we operate under the governance of a board of trustees. We are a voluntary organization. We do not have a government agency that is specifically required for oversight of our operation.
So there's no government agency that monitors what you do, correct?
Not to my-
Is it correct that in some states, SACS does receive oversight from, for instance, the Department of Education in that state?
Only if we're carrying out work on behalf of the Department of Education in a contractual relationship, and if they use our accreditation for purposes related to their responsibilities, but that's it.
So if someone believed that SACS was acting inappropriately, they couldn't go to anyone and tell them that they're not doing their job appropriately and get some recourse through that process, right?
You're asking me to interpret what here? If they did something illegal?
No, I'm just asking if I wanted to complain about SACS, there's no one for me to go to who could do anything about my complaint, correct?
That's a pretty broad statement. Are you talking about the nature of, you want to complain to the Board of Trustees? We're a voluntary, non-profit organization. We're a private entity. It just is any other non-profit private entity here in the state of Georgia.
Now, I want to turn to the report that I referred you to at Exhibit 24, and it's the special review visit report from the visits in October 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Did you participate in any of the interviews of any of the people who
No.
were interviewed?
No.
And do you know how many people were actually interviewed by the review team?
I would have to see the interview schedule.
So as you sit here today, you don't know.
We provided you the interview schedule this morning, but I'd have to look at that schedule and count the names on it.
I believe you provided me an interview schedule for May of 2013.
But there is a schedule. I'd have to have that schedule to count the number of people, but it's not a number that I would. It was provided to us by the system. They created the schedule and they identified the people to be interviewed.
Actually, the report itself says that there were 50 individuals who were interviewed. Does that sound about, would you?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. She's asking about the report. The report says what the report says. She doesn't need to ask him
Yeah, I
what
just
the
noticed
report
that.
says when he said he's not familiar. You should look at the report.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with her saying, the report indicates 16 individuals. Does that sound right? I think that's an appropriate question to ask.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Okay. So the report, I believe at page 3 says there are about 50 people.
Yeah, it lists the roles there, yes.
Now, compared to the March 2012 report, there were well over 100 people who were interviewed, correct?
Different type of engagement, yes. It should have had more people because it was a broader evaluation.
Now, in this report, you don't name any of the board members in regards to a lot of the specific allegations. Why is that?
Because we evaluate the performance of the Board of Education, not individuals on the Board of Education.
Now, in several instances, you do identify the chair of the Board of Education.
That's a role. That's a specified role, just as a superintendent or a principal or a teacher. It's just a role.
And you are aware that the role was held by one specific individual, correct?
Just as a superintendent is, yes.
Okay. So, in naming the board chair, you were aware that everyone would identify that person as Dr. Walker, correct?
Just answer that, just as any other person holding a role that is specified to a person, such as a superintendent. Of course.
So I want to, now, once you completed this report, what did you all do with the notes and the evidence that the report was based on?
What did we do with them?
Yes.
What notes? What are you talking about?
Well,
Which notes?
Well, let me ask you this. Did the people, the interviewers, take notes?
They took notes, yes.
And what happened to those notes?
They retained those notes.
Okay. Now, you previously testified on this issue that the notes were destroyed, didn't you?
I didn't say they were, I said we don't maintain notes. That does not mean they're destroyed. I don't know if the individual who took the notes, what they did with them, but we do not retain the notes.
So Dr. Elgart, when you testified before the State Board of Education and you were asked about notes and you stated that they were destroyed.
I don't remember saying that they were, I said we do not retain them. That's a different statement. We do not maintain the notes.
So if you would turn the page inside the binder that you have up there, there's some papers, some loose papers in the folder. And John, I'm referring to the February 12th, I believe, 21st, 2013 testimony before the State Board of Education.
This?
Yes. And those pages are double-sided. But if you would turn to page 88.
Your Honor, we ask, I mean, this is not an exhibit, apparently. It's loose leaf paper at the beginning of the exhibit book. Could she identify the document that she's asking you to
Yes,
refer
I
to?
just said it's the February 21st transcript of the State Board of Education testimony.
You've got the entire transcript?
No, I just have his transcript, his testimony taken out of the binder. I have the entire transcript if we need it, but I just took his testimony out just for...
Was the transcript offered into evidence by
It
the
is,
attorney
Your Honor.
general?
I want to identify what it is. It's been tendered and admitted as part of the state's exhibits.
What exhibit is it?
That's going to be Exhibit 10, Your Honor.
Counsel, do you have a page you're...
Yes, that's that page 88.
88. All right. Dr. Elgart, have you found that?
Okay.
There you
All right, so Dr. Elgart, as far as the interviewer notes, you've testified that you all have those?
No. It
Okay.
says we do not maintain them.
Okay, I'm asking about your testimony here a few seconds ago.
I said we do not maintain them.
Okay, so you don't maintain the notes. What happens to them?
The individuals have them. We don't. They're volunteers. We don't maintain them. I don't know what the individuals do with the notes.
So if you wanted to go back to the notes or to the interviewer's notes to back up their recollection or confirm that it's correct, how would you do that?
Objection, Your Honor. He's already testified. He doesn't know what happened with the notes.
Well,
It's also not relevant. I mean, you know, what an interviewer's notes, what an interviewer did with the notes, the interviewers aren't on trial here.
Well, the report is very relevant,
The
I
report
think.
is relevant, but
And
what
so
the
this-
interviewers did with their notes, why
I
is that
guess
relevant?
the veracity, how do we determine that what's contained in this report is accurate? He's saying they don't maintain the notes. Well, if I want to see, well, what did this person really say? Did they actually say this? How do I figure that out? Then from memory of the interviewer, I mean, I just have to depend on this report and take it, as gospel that this is what happened?
Well, we have a report, and what someone does with the notes that they used in formulating the report, I don't see why that's important.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how would somebody like my client be able to figure out if this report is indeed accurate.
Your Honor, just for reference, Dr. Elgart has already testified that there is an appeals process, that there are multiple avenues that the board can take a look at some of these. Maybe she can ask some of those questions about the processes that are in
I'm not
place.
interested in the appeals process. We're way beyond that.
What
I mean,
I'm interested in is, would the return of Dr. Walker to the board be an asset to reattaining or maintaining accreditation? I may be saying that inartfully. That's getting far afield about some note that was taken by somebody who was a volunteer for advanced ed and what they did with the notes. So I'm going to sustain the objection. I would
Okay.
prefer we get away from the notes and their disposition and get back to more germane subject matter, please.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Elgart, when this report was prepared, how did you review the report prior to it being published?
Prior to it being given to the school system, yes. In its final draft, yes.
And when you reviewed the report, was it for the purpose of ensuring the information was accurate?
Now, it's for ensuring that the actions that the team was recommending, the required actions, and what they are recommending for action by our organization was consistent with our policies. So I looked at the required actions, the nature of them. Did they support the recommendation of probation?
Would it be of concern to you if you were to learn that there's information contained in this report that is not accurate?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
I would agree. I would agree with that. You think it's inaccurate?
But my question
thinks
was, would
it's
it be a
accurate.
problem or concern if there was information that is in fact inaccurate?
You're saying theoretically, are you saying would inaccurate information theoretically damage the report?
Would inaccurate information ultimately change his mind as to whether or not this school board should have been placed on probation?
Will you answer that, please?
I can answer only in this way. The narrative that leads to the required actions. If the required actions are accurate, we do over 2,000 of these a year. Might there be a statement in a narrative of a report that might be not 100% accurate? The question then would be, does that accuracy impact the required actions? And so it's what we do not hold a school or school system accountable to is the narrative. What we hold them accountable to is the required actions, because that's where we want action, not on the narrative. And so the narrative, even by the nature of this report, says we have summarized the evidence, not categorized every piece of evidence. This is a professional, collegial document to the school system. It is done by volunteers. It is for the purpose of helping the system improve. It was never designed, quite frankly, and with all due respect, for a court of law to analyze as a legal document based on transcripts. Our school systems couldn't afford to have hundreds of interviews and observations all transcribed as you do in a court to ensure 100% accuracy. What's important here is the required actions. Did they target areas that the system must improve? And I'll note this earlier. The system, when it was presented with the required actions, the board and administration verbally accepted these are areas we agree we must improve. So that's our validation, that those areas which we must all move forward to address, we're not addressing the narrative. We're now addressing required actions. Everybody agreed. They left that room that day in agreement that we must address these areas to move this system forward. For us, that's what's most important here today. It's what's most important tomorrow, no matter who's superintendent, who's on the Board of Education, who's leading a school. Those things must be addressed.
So the narrative that is contained in this report, does it in any way inform the required actions?
It helps provide a basis. Helps. It's not the sole determinant.
And given that it helps provide a basis for the required actions, is there any threshold of accuracy that you believe is necessary for the narrative?
It has to be accurate to the best of our knowledge. And the team believes when they provided this, that this narrative was accurate to the best of their knowledge. Because in this process, we're dependent upon individuals as well as documents that is provided to us by the system. They provided us the individuals to be interviewed. They provided us the evidence. So we're dependent on the system providing us accurate evidence and the individuals who are in those interviews providing us with accurate information. An individual in an interview, that individual cannot by themselves steer a report. If somebody makes a claim in an interview, we look for others to either make a similar claim and documentation that supports that claim. So there's no individual biases of one person being interviewed by the system, that the system is presented, that could drive this report, no matter what their position. The superintendent is no more important to the makeup of this narrative as anybody else. So she might have made a claim. We would look for documentation and evidence to support that claim. By herself, we would not be able to accept it as evidence.
Now, in this report, you made a claim regarding textbooks, and nobody within the realm of folks that you interviewed were able to say that any textbooks have been purchased by the school district or distributed to school. Is that a claim that you would have sought to verify through some other type of evidence?
Your Honor, is she referring to a particular report?
I'm referring to the October 2012 report and the textbook issue that we talked about quite extensively the last 2 days.
Well, you
I'm just making sure that Dr. Elgart has an opportunity to take a look at the things that you're referring to. I
Okay.
just wanted you to refer him.
Why
to
don't
it.
y'all address your conversation to me instead of each other?
Apologies, Your Honor. We just want to make sure that Dr. Elgart is able to respond to the question with reference to the report that's being.
Are you familiar with the report involving textbooks?
I know it's referenced in here, but I did not do the interviews, and I did not conduct the review of documentation regarding textbooks.
Do you have
I
a
know it's
section?
referenced here.
Yes, I can refer him to the section in the report that deals with interviews. So if you would turn to, one moment please, page 6 of the report,
Okay.
What's the date of the report,
of
please?
the October 2012 report of Exhibit 24.
Alrighty.
And that would be under section B of the report.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm here. I'm
Okay,
waiting.
so you've had an opportunity to review that section of the report.
I just read it.
Okay. So does it help refresh your recollection that one of the claims that was made in this report is that the district incurred approximately $12 million for textbooks, yet numerous interviews revealed no one could identify any school that had received new textbooks, and it was reported that nearly all schools were struggling with ways to repair textbooks. Are you aware of that claim?
That's what the statement says here.
And would you consider that to be a pretty serious allegation on the part of Sachs that $12 million was spent, that nobody can
What
verify what happened?
this statement is reflecting is what numerous interviews told us.
Okay.
It is not what we determined, it is what the interviewees told us.
And my question to you, Dr. Elgart, is how did you verify that? Because that's a pretty serious claim to be putting in a report in regards to these school board members, that $12 million is missing. So how did you verify that?
Numerous interviewers.
Okay, so do you know if your team spoke with the textbook coordinator?
I don't have the list of who they spoke to.
Would it-
It's some roles or responsibilities are listed here. I'm assuming that some of these people responsible, such as the chief financial officer, the associate superintendent, who might have curriculum responsibilities. I don't know which one
So
of
you would
these.
expect those people to be asked about this specific issue,
I don't know who
right?
was asked. I was not on the
Okay.
team.
But you've just identified the chief financial officer and the curriculum person. Were you doing
No,
that?
you asked me about a textbook person. I don't know who would be that textbook person would report to.
Okay.
I don't know.
But you would expect someone to try to verify this information, correct? Or is it not important?
Numerous interviews. That implies that a number of people confirmed or revealed the same thing.
Okay. And would it be concerning to you, would it have any impact on the recommended actions to know that this statement is not
Objection,
true?
Your Honor. Calls for speculation and is argumentative.
I would agree. I mean, you know,
Well, he said this in part drives the required actions. If it's not true, does
that's
it
for
have
me to
impact?
determine.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, I've heard testimony on this issue from your witnesses. And I'm not going to accept the premise that your witnesses are necessarily, I'm going to look at both sides and make a call. But you
Okay.
can't presume in your question that, your witnesses, who I'm perceiving, say something different than the SACS report. And, let's just go from there. Are you aware that others disagree? Something like that. Instead of
Okay.
premising your question
Well-
that this group is telling the truth and your group is lying.
And Your Honor, not to be argumentative, but I guess I'm trying to understand if we're talking about a narrative in a report that resulted in required actions for school board members to engage in, well, if the required action isn't necessary because the report is inaccurate, do we remove someone from the school board because of it?
I'm not assuming the report is inaccurate, though. You're assuming you're saying that it's inaccurate. The premise of your question is inaccurate.
Yeah.
Is that it
I'm
is
just
inaccurate.
asking, how did you determine that it was accurate? He
That's
said
fine.
numerous
That's
interviews.
fair game. That's
Okay.
fair game. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So other than the numerous interviews, do you know of anything else used to verify this claim?
First and foremost, we did not have a required action on the textbook issue specifically. So I'm
Well,
trying
but you have required actions.
We have a
regarding
required
your
action.
issues.
If the
if I
witness would
may,
be allowed to finish.
so that I can give a context to this, all of Section B, which is basically outlining there's concerns about the budget process and the ability of the school system to stay within the budget. There was a number of areas identified as by interviewees as potentially why they right now have a deficit. Okay? The question raised by interviewees is they're trying to figure out as a system, how did we get to this point of deficit? So the required action was not to any one of those specific examples that interviewees raised. The required action was implement and adhere to fiscally responsible policies and practices that ensure that DeKalb County Board of Education will adopt and ensure proper implementation of budgets within the financial means of the school system, and that support the delivery of an educational program that meets the needs of students. That statement has nothing any more to do. These are just some examples. The system itself, when we presented it, said, yes, we need to do a better job in how we prepare and enact our budgets. We are clearly having difficulty because right now we're in deficit. So a system going in deficit is an unusual event. So it is a responsible response from us to say, look at your policies and your practices. Going forward, you need to right-size your budget. You need to stay within your means because you can't sustain this. You cannot continue to operate in deficit. So it was not attacking what happened to the textbooks. It was not attacking legal fees. It was saying you determine how to spend your money, but make sure it's spent within your means and to support the needs of students.
So the issue with the textbooks, you all were not saying that somebody had spent $12 million and the textbooks didn't exist?
All I can say is what interviewees reported to us, and it clearly I'm intimating from is that there's disagreement on that. Well, if there's disagreement, they all have to reconcile it. If some of them believe it wasn't spent and others believe it, that's a problem the system need to figure out internal. That's an internal problem.
Now,
SACS is focused on their fiscal capability and responsibility in meeting the needs of students. That's it. But the issue with textbooks is an internal problem to the system and has no bearing on our expectation.
Now, one of the claims that you all were concerned about is that a board member raised concerns about the budget and believed that the budget was $50 million, that they were approximately $54 million over budget. Did that claim ever come to fruition?
I have no idea who and what context you're referencing this. Is it in the report?
Well, if you would look at the section B, the first paragraph of the report, you all refer to a board member who showed the district would incur approximately $54 million over budget in just 3 areas of operation.
Now I know there was a board member who actually distributed to the rest of the board and shared with our team. Okay, that showed this, yes.
And did you all believe that the board member was correct? Did you take what they said to be true?
You would have to ask the team. I did not. This is what is being reported to us. Okay?
So you don't know personally whether that was
I didn't write
correct
the
or not?
report. I was not on the team.
Now, when you say that you reviewed this report, did you do it, did you have to sign off on the report before it was distributed to the schools?
What do you mean by sign off?
Well, did he have to concur with the required actions and the proposed actions that they were?
As I mentioned
suggesting?
earlier, all my responsibility is to make sure that the required actions and the recommendation from the team are consistent with our policies. My role is to ensure that we're following our policies and the decisions that are being made, and then I have a responsibility to transmit that decision to the appropriate body.
Now, there's a section in the report that I want to refer you to that refers to the board chair supporting a resume of a young man, and it's on page 7 under section D of the report. Are you familiar with this issue?
I'm familiar with the report.
Okay, are you familiar with that part of the report?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, so you're familiar with the issue I'm referring to where the board chair sent a resume for a young man?
I'm only familiar with what's in the report.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with the actual issue and who was involved and everything. All I'm familiar with is what's written in the report.
And what I want to know is, did you review the emails that this claim is based on?
Not my role. My role is to ensure that the report follows policy. It was
Okay,
the
so-
team and responsibility to ensure what they had.
So in your earlier testimony, when you kept referring to "we" in regards to the reports, you didn't mean, you weren't including yourself as part of the team that was actually preparing these reports. Is that right?
No, I'm not sure what you're referencing, but I do have a role to play. I'm part of the overall. There's a lot of layers to this, and mine has a specific role here at the end of this process.
When you receive complaints from individuals about the school board, did you maintain a copy of those complaints?
Those complaints do not come, usually they go to the state office, which is in Kennesaw. They're responsible for administering the program here in Georgia.
So, which the state office in Kennesaw, would they maintain a copy of those reports?
Of those
Of
reports,
the complaints, any complaints you received?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, you talked earlier about the the length of time it took for the school board to hire a new superintendent
Correct.
prior to Dr. Atkinson being hired. And who was the chair of the school board at that time?
Tom Bowen, I believe.
Now, when Dr. Atkinson left the employment of the DeKalb County School Board, a new superintendent was hired very quickly, correct?
I mean, yeah, they have a superintendent. I don't know how quickly, but yes, they have a new superintendent.
Yeah.
Interim.
You don't-
Interim. They don't have a permanent, but they,
Okay.
I think, believe his title
Well,
is
do you
interim.
recall that the interim superintendent started immediately, started as soon as Dr. Atkinson left, right?
I don't know the exact dates, Counselor. I know that they have an interim superintendent.
And you would agree that it was a positive step that they were able to quickly hire an interim superintendent, right?
They have an interim superintendent. They don't have permanent, but yes, they
But my
needed to.
question is, do you agree that it's a positive step that they were able to hire interim superintendent?
It was a step that they legally had to take.
Was it positive or not?
We will find out whether it was the right decision, just as
Well, to date, in your opinion, was it a positive step for them to hire Michael Thurman?
well, now I'm confused, because before you were asking me the speed in which they did it, was that positive? Or are you asking me now an assessment of the leadership of Michael Thurman?
I'm asking you, let's answer both. Was it positive that they were able to hire an interim superintendent as quickly as they did?
They had no choice, just as they did when Crawford Lewis left. The responsibility of the board is immediately to get an interim in place. It's not a permanent interim. The assessment on Mr. Thurman's leadership is yet to be determined.
So your response is that you don't know if it was a good choice yet, and you don't, and you still haven't told me whether you thought it was positive that they were able to hire someone and fill the interim position as quickly as they did.
They had
Your
to.
Honor, objection asked and answered. He's pretty
But he has
competent.
yet to be responsive to the question. It's a yes or no question.
It
Counselor is
was-
not entitled to her version of the answer.
He can say no. That's
Ladies and gentlemen,
perfectly
ladies and gentlemen, I do think it's appropriate for a yes or no question to be answered with a yes or no. That has not occurred here several times. So Dr. Elgart, if you could answer a yes or no question with a yes or no, and then if you want to expound on that, please do so. If he does expound on it, please allow him to do so.
I
Okay?
think I have allowed him to expound quite a bit.
Yeah, not always. Not always. So, can you give us a yes or no answer to that question? And if you can't give us a yes or no
Yes,
answer,
they
then-
hired an interim superintendent. Yes. They hired an interim superintendent, as they are required to do. They needed to do that immediately, as quickly as possible, because there needed to be a person identified in charge of the system. So is it positive? Yes, and it was required of them. And it was no more different than any other school system would have done in the same circumstance. They are required to do so.
And the ability to do that was a big decision that this board had to make, correct?
The ability to what? Hire an interim?
The fact that they were able to hire an interim superintendent as quickly as they did, that was a big decision that they
Yes.
had to make, correct? And that was done under the leadership of Eugene Walker, correct?
I don't know who the board chair was when Michael Thurman was appointed interim superintendent.
Okay. Are you aware that the school board, during Dr. Walker's tenure, had to redistrict the system and had to close a number of schools?
If you, I'm not specific, is it in this report, are you referencing?
No, I simply asked, are you aware of that or not? Yes or no?
Not specifically, not
Okay.
enough to share any information, I have no idea.
Okay, would you agree that redistricting and closing schools, that those are big decisions that have to be made by the school board?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Are you aware that the school board, while Dr. Walker was a member, had to cut $107 million from his budget,
From his budget?
from the school board's budget.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative and assumes facts, not in evidence.
I'm going to open the objection.
No, I'm not aware because I don't have the budget you're referencing at all.
Okay. Would you agree that having to make significant cuts of more than $100 million from a budget would be a big decision that a school board would have to make, right?
Yes, it's a tough decision.
Now, when Sachs proposed that the DeKalb County School District be placed on probation, you believe that it would take them, or you expected them to take at least a year in order to come back into compliance.
We gave them 1 year.
So, and that was based on your previous experience. You expected that to be about the length of time that it would take for the school board to get back in compliance. Is that right?
The school system,
The school system, yes.
1 year.
And after Sachs made the decision, you made some public statements saying that you thought the governor was acting too fast in trying to remove the members of the DeKalb County School Board, correct?
I did not. Not specific, not the way you paraphrased it.
So tell me what you said.
I was asked how the law, the current law under which I believe this hearing is occurring, how it might be improved. And in most cases, the school system and the state board and our organization signed agreements to stay the 30-day hearing another 6 months. And my recommendation was that if they were to amend the law, that giving a school system 6 months before the hearing would kick in would be a reasonable adjustment to the law. The governor enacted the law as was required by him. He had no other option, nor did the state board.
Did you ever say that the school board should be given a chance to come into compliance?
The school system is being given a chance to come into compliance. We gave them 1 year. We did not drop them from accreditation. The school system, which we accredit, we don't accredit the school board, has 1 year in which to come into compliance.
Your Honor, I would like to play what's part of Petitioner's Exhibit number 27, which is news footage about the Elgart speaking to lawmakers. And this is for impeachment purposes. We believe it's going to directly contradict the testimony he's just.
Okay, I was briefed by our technical people that we're not going to be able to play that.
Well, Your Honor, I can't play it here because of the video streaming, but I can play it on a phone because it doesn't have to go over the internet. So I don't know if that would be acceptable.
No, what I'd like to do is I'll leave the record open for 10 days
Okay.
of our conclusion today, and allow you to submit a DVD
Okay.
of that.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm going to expect you to, in good faith, copy Mr. Willard with that,
Yes.
and I will give it whatever weight it is deemed appropriate.
Yes, sir.
Let's move on.
Okay, we'll move on. Now, Mr. Elgart, after you made statements on March 13th about, first of all, I asked before if you had stated that the board needed to be given a chance before they were removed, and your response was no, correct?
I have no idea what you're referencing. I
Okay.
have no recollection of who, in what context. I don't know what you're
Do
referencing.
you recall a meeting before the black lawmakers in March of 2012 after your report came out placing the DeKalb County School Board on probation?
That meeting was about the law in general.
Okay. And do you recall saying at that meeting that you thought the DeKalb School Board members ought to be given a chance before they're removed?
I don't I don't recall. I recall talking about how to improve the law, which I already stated, is that we give a year, and that in the future, if they want to improve the law, to give a school system 6 months before going before a state board hearing, and I stand by that recommendation. I believe that in our experience, that gives an opportunity for everybody, but that's
Okay.
my professional opinion.
Okay, so,
It was just
so
on
you
the
think
law.
the law that exists in Georgia is,
What he thinks about the law in Georgia is irrelevant.
okay, but
Okay.
it's your opinion that, we're having some feedback, I think it might be coming from,
You know, the sound feedback, yeah, I'm hearing a little bit of it. Let's continue, but
Okay.
we'll try to
But,
resolve
so
it.
my question is, it was your belief that the school board members should be given a chance to address the problems before they're removed from the board, correct?
Yes, I said the school system should be given 6 months before a state board hearing is required.
Okay. And after you made the statements in March of 2012, the public statements, do you recall an email from someone on your staff informing you that the governor saw your comments or was told of your comments and he was not happy? His facial expression reaction wasn't pleasant.
Objection.
That's irrelevant. I mean, really, that's irrelevant. What the governor thinks of his comments is irrelevant.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess what I wanted to ask was, what steps did he take as a result of learning that the governor was not happy, the person who's going to be making the decision in this case about whether Mr. Walker should be replaced or not?
Run that by me again.
According to the email that we have, after this, they suggested that Mr. Elgart contact the governor's office, and I think it would be very relevant as to what communications he then had with anyone in the governor's office regarding this issue. And this is, Your Honor, I'm looking at page 4 of the documents that were produced by Advanced Ed this morning.
Can I see it?
Yeah. Do you have a copy of that?
Yes, we do have a copy.
Do you have a page 3?
Got a lot of pages, 1 and 2.
That's what my page 3 says.
No, I'm at page 4, but I'm at page 3.
I've just said that's page 3.
I don't have that one.
It'd be before page 4.
Yeah.
Is it not that?
I don't have a page 3.
All right, I'm seeing the page 4 where it says Sachs says deal moving too fast to replace DeKalb Board of Education.
Okay. Now, I guess I don't have one of the pages, the page 3 that preceded page 4, but at the top of page 4 it says www.wsbtv.com.
Mm-hmm. I've got that.
And in fact, it's the video that I was intending to play.
Okay, but you know, that is what someone at WSB has characterized something someone from Sachs has said.
Right.
That someone may be Dr. Elgart, maybe someone else. I don't care what WSB TV says.
And I understand that.
Okay,
But
with
my
all due respect
question-
to all TV outlets, I mean, that's not going to be driving this train.
Right, and my only concern or questions that I would like to ask is not about what he said, but according to this email, after, it was observed that the governor's facial reaction wasn't
Objection, Your Honor.
pleasant.
There are listening members of the press here, of the public. She's talking about something that has not been tendered into evidence that we've already said is completely irrelevant to this proceeding. If we want to talk about it, that's fine, but I would prefer that we don't have.
Council approach the bench.
Okay.
Thank you.
What are you trying to go with this?
Well, if he contacted the governor after, I guess he knew the governor wasn't happy, about his statement that they were moving too fast. Did he have any conversations with them? What was the nature of the conversations? Because the question is, should these people have been removed? Are they going to be in a position to help retain accrediting? And he's already testified that he believes that at least 6 months should be given to the
Right.
school district
Right.
to respond. So within that 6 months, my client would have continued to be on the board, and he would have been in a position to help ensure that the
But that's
accreditation came
speculating
back.
as to a change in 20-2-73, which doesn't exist. I mean, I don't know what relevance, if hypothetically the law was different.
I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but the fact that the decision maker is having conversations with the person who's going to be making recommendations
Right. You can
about
ask
the bill.
witness- You can ask the witness, have you had any discussions with the governor's staff on this subject? You can ask that question.
Okay.
That's relevant. You can ask him, have your conversations with the governor or his staff in any way influenced your testimony here today? That's relevant. But other than that, whether he thinks Georgia law is good or bad or doesn't really matter.
I want to make sure I have a short memory for any conversation with him, no matter what age I am.
It's fair game to ask him if he's had any communication with the governor's staff about this issue.
Okay.
It's fair game. Second, fair game. Any contact that he may have, if he had any,
Did it influence?
influence his testimony here today.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Okay.
I don't know if the mics are too close together.
I think maybe.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't do that.
Oh, you're talking about the feedback?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Dr. Elgart, have you had any conversations with the governor or any member of his staff about this issue?
No.
And, okay, thank you. Now, you mentioned, in the report itself, it said that it expected the school board members to the school district to address the required actions within a year, correct?
Correct.
And the DeKalb County School Board was not the first school district that was placed on probation by advanced ed, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, in the state of Georgia, you all have placed several school districts on probation, correct?
Yes.
And most of the school districts that you placed on probation in the state of Georgia, they were able to regain a higher level of accreditation, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, all except for one school district was not able to attain a higher level of accreditation, correct?
In what time frame?
Well, how many schools within the state of Georgia has SACs placed on probation within the last 5 years?
I don't have that exact number.
Okay. Did you all place Douglas County on probation in 2010?
I'm not sure. We have 32,000 schools. I cannot say for certain unless you showed me a record or I had access to my records. I can't verify that statement.
Okay. Do you recall any specific school district within Georgia that you placed on probation?
Probably.
Do you recall that you all placed the Atlanta Public School System on probation in January of 2010?
Honestly, I can't remember whether it was probation or warned. I'd have to see the record. Once again, we have 32,000 schools.
But you know that you put them on some level of accreditation that was less than full accreditation, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall that by November of 2012, the Atlanta Public Schools have been restored to full accreditation?
I don't know the exact dates. You're asking me to recall records that pertain to 32,000 institutions.
Okay. Do you recall that one of the major issues with the Atlanta Public School System was governance issues?
Yes.
And do you recall that out of the 9 school board members, only one of them left the school board?
left in what time frame when, I'm not,
After they were placed on probation.
I don't know how many left.
Okay. But would you agree with me that in the past, schools that you all have placed on probation have most of the time been able to restore their accreditation to a higher level?
Historically, schools that we've placed on probation throughout our entire network, given the time, have made the commitment and taken the actions to address the problems.
And usually the schools need a little time to do that, but it usually happens within a year or two, correct?
Usually.
And in the instance of the DeKalb County School Board, if they had been given the time to do that.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Well, let's let her finish the question.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'm sorry, Dr. Elgart, in the case of the DeKalb County School Board, if they had been permitted to work on these issues, they too would have been able to work towards full accreditation.
Overrule the objection. Overrule the objection. You can answer the question.
We've given them time. We've given them 1 year.
Well, and you gave a school board that was in existence when this report was
We gave the
issued-
school system.
I'm sorry. You gave the school system as it was constituted when this report was issued 1 year to retain their
Yes.
accreditation, correct?
Yes.
And there's nothing about the school board member, there's nothing about Dr. Eugene Walker and his behavior on the school board that would have prevented the school district from attaining full accreditation if they had started working.
I have no idea. I can't answer that question.
So it's something you would have needed to observe in order to make a decision as to whether or not he could help the school board attain full accreditation, correct?
You're asking the witness to put a square peg in a round hole. You know, he's already testified that the board as a whole was looked at, and now we find ourselves in a situation where I have to assess Dr. Walker. So it's really not a fair question to ask him. You've asked him, I believe, if there's specific negative information in the report about Dr. Walker, and that's appropriate. But you know,
But he was asked specifically if Dr. Walker would, his going back on the board would be more likely,
Right.
more likely than not
Yes.
assist the district in retaining the accreditation.
Yep,
So
that's
my
what we're
only
here for.
question is, you know, there was nothing about how Dr. Walker was performing prior to this probation happened to make him think he would not have done what all those people on those other school boards did when they were placed on probation, which was to work with advanced ed to ensure the district came off of probation.
well, but that premise is not relevant. Rightly or wrongly, that's not the relevant premise. You know, what you know, you're asking this witness to speculate what would have happened if
Right,
Dr.
isn't
Walker had been
it-
able to you know, stay put. That might be something that comes up in the public arena for discussion, but I don't think it's relevant here.
Yeah, but I don't understand how it's not speculation for him to speculate as to whether or not Dr. Walker is more likely than not to help the school district reattain its accreditation.
He's expressing his opinion about that. That's different from what you're asking. Okay, you're asking, you know, if my interpretation of what you're asking is if Dr. Walker had had more time, couldn't he have fixed it? Am I wrong?
Well, yes.
I'm wrong, and that's not what you're asking?
No, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Yes, that's what I'm
Okay.
asking.
All right. Well,
Yeah, if he hadn't been removed from his position, wouldn't he have been able to fix it?
you want to answer that or not? I'll leave it up to you. I mean,
It's hard for me to answer. I mean, he contributed to the position they were in to be placed on probation, so I don't know.
I don't see how anybody can
I
answer that.
can't.
Well,
Me,
but,
him.
But I think
The question is, will he? Whether we like the statute or not, we have to live within the means of that
We don't
statute.
like the
And I know you followed the constitutionality, but we have to look at the narrowness of the statute. I've let the envelope open about as far as it can stretch. But you know, I'm not going to let him. I'm not going to. Well, he's answered it. So.
Okay, but that, and I'm about to wrap up, Your Honor, but I do want to just be clear on a few things. In the report, you all make some pretty major references to the chair of the board, who was Dr. Eugene Walker.
Your Honor, just to be clear, we've got 3 reports in evidence. Can we
And I'm
just
sorry,
specify?
the October 2012 report, you make some pretty big references to the chair of the board. And in regards to those references to Dr. Walker, who was the chair of the board when this report came out, do you have any concerns if those things turn out not to be accurate?
First off, how many references are there?
Okay, so-
I can't, and I gotta understand in what context
I know all of
to
them,
answer that
and I
question.
can ask you about all of them.
Well,
So
if
if
I
we
can
go to
look,
page 9 of the report at Exhibit 24, at the bottom of the page,
Your Honor, she's asking the witness to speculate, once again, and we're back to.
No, she asked him if he has any concern.
I think she said if concerns if they turn out to be inaccurate.
Right.
I mean, once again, she's speculated, asking the witness to speculate about something that he's already testified is not something within his purview. He reviews the required actions. Once again, she's asking him about the narrative.
So your objection is what?
Your Honor, I'm objecting that she's asking him to speculate on something that falls outside of his purview. She's asking him, with the board chair, references that exist within the narrative. He's already testified on both direct and cross-examination that he doesn't deal with the narrative. He looks at the required actions to determine if they're in compliance with SAC's policy.
I agree with that.
but the narrative, the required actions are developed in a vacuum. I mean, how do we get to the required
Counsel,
actions?
I believe my ruling.
Okay, thank you. One moment, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Elgart, is it correct that the DeKalb County School District was not accredited as a school district until 2006 or 2007?
we established that protocol in 2004, so nobody was prior to 2004.
So prior to 2004, the DeKalb School District, did they have any type of accreditation?
They're individual schools.
So individual schools. So you testified at the State Board of Education hearing that they had been on probation back in 2004. So was that correct?
I don't recall, because the system wasn't on probation. We didn't accredit as a system. I think I don't recall the exact reference, but the schools, I'd have to once again go back in my records.
So the first instance in which the school district was on probation was 2012.
I don't know, Counselor. I'd have to go back in our records and go to our archives. It's 10 years ago. So with the schools, under our new protocol, yes. Since 2006, or 2007, whichever you said, under this new protocol, yes. The first time under our systems protocol, the system was placed on probation was 2012.
Now, on your special review team, did you have anybody who's an expert in school finances?
I don't recall who was on the team, quite frankly, and which team you're referencing.
The special review team for October 2012.
I don't recall.
Do you have anyone who works or volunteers for Advanced Ed who is an expert in the area of school finances?
I have people who work for Advanced Ed who are expert in school finances, absolutely.
But you can't testify whether or not they were on this particular special review
I don't know
team in October.
I don't know the background and experience of those on the team.
Okay, I don't think I have any additional questions at this time.
All right, redirect.
Just 1 second,
No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, Dr. Elgart, you can step down. You're